So I'll go ahead and start the recording. I'm going to leave my video off. I'm at home today and I'm not hardwired in, so I'm going to leave the video off in case I have any issues with connectivity or anything like that. This is session 6 out of 7, so this is our next to last session in the 2021 Spring Online Course Design Training Series. And this week we're going to be talking about powering it all up and promoting success through technology and learner support. So there's two parts to today's session. The first part is, as usual, a little presentation that I'm going to do. And then we're going to spend the rest of the time in the Quality Matters resources that are available. And we're going to talk about self-reviews and different things like that. So as always, if you have any questions, thoughts, ideas along the way, feel free to add those to the chat. If you want some time to talk on the mic, you're more than welcome to do so. I do not believe today's session will go over an hour. It may be even a little short of that. We'll see. But there is still some good stuff we'll talk about today. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to start out with our topics for the day, which we normally do. And so this week we have 3 main topics, and they are to integrate a variety of tools throughout our course that are aligned to standards and promote active learning, protecting student data and privacy, and then providing students with access to various supports, including technical accessibility, academic, and student services. The good part of that topic 3 is that a lot of that work's already done for you, and I'm going to show you how to find that and how to document that. So that's really good. Not a whole lot. Actually, topic number 2, a lot of that work's done for you already as well, too. So we're going to learn more about that. As we move forward, we're going to start. I can't talk. We're going to start about talking about integrating technology tools. And so I've written in here, the LMS offers a variety of options for authoring course content, including pages, assignments, document or discussion forums, announcements, and quizzes. We talked about all those in the fall series we did. However, there will most likely be times that you need to integrate technology tools outside the learning management system when designing online courses. So it may be, depending on certain situations, that the tools that are available within Moodle are not enough for what you need to do. And so when do you reach that point, or how do you reach that point? We're going to talk about that on the next slide. So when I get to the next slide, it's titled Tool Selection, Where Do I Start? And so as we've talked about in the last 3 sessions, alignment is the most important factor that should drive the need to seek out additional tools. And that is based on the objectives, alignment to the objectives. So we went through this phase of where what everyone refers to as Web 2.0 first came out and was introduced. And with that came all kinds of awesome, creative, fun tools for everyone to use. And so a lot of people, a lot of educators, myself at one time included, thought, hey, this is awesome, let's start using this, and let's start using this. And so we just tossed a bunch of tools in, only mainly, if we think about it, really for the purpose of they look cool. But that's not really what should drive the use of things outside the learning management system. What should are the learning objectives and the alignment that we've talked about over the past 3 sessions. And so the bottom part there says the action verbs in your course move up Bloom's taxonomy to the applying, analyzing, creating, or evaluating and creating levels. And as that happens, you might need to integrate different third-party tools in order to align to the objectives. Might be in the key word. It all depends on your objectives. And so I'm not going to go into specific objectives today. We're going to hit on some concepts and some supports that are available in terms of tool selection. And then we're going to go into the other pieces of today's, because our most important part of today's session is supporting students in different ways. So with that being said, let's go to the next slide. And here we're going to talk about synchronous versus asynchronous. So over the past year, pretty much I believe every one of you now knows that the difference between synchronous and asynchronous, synchronous being same time, same place, whether it be video conferencing, audio call, whatever it may be, that's synchronous. And then we have asynchronous, which, excuse me, are more like discussion forums that interactivity takes place over a period of time. So I've linked to a document that's been created by Distance Learning, and you can click on the link to view it. Ooh, whoops, it's wanting me to, okay, because it's inside the LMS and it opened inside of Microsoft Edge. So it'll take me, so just a minute. If you're logged into the LMS, it'll go directly there. So Distance Learning's created a document that defines the two delivery methods and then gives different examples throughout the table of what is an example of a synchronous session versus an asynchronous. So if I hold a live session like we're doing right now, that is of course the synchronous part. But as some of you know, maybe you're watching the archive and you're not with us live today, then you're going back and watching the recorded lecture posted in the LMS. And so we've designed this course or this training series to be able to be accessed and participated in both formats. So I'm not going to go through all the different items in that tool, in that table, in that resource, but it is there for your examples. And then there's some examples at the bottom on blended when asynchronous and synchronous come together. And I guess, sorry, I'm showing myself and not showing you all. So let me bring that up. I realize now what I'm doing. But the table I'm referring to should be on the screen in place of the presentation. And as I scroll down through, there's some different examples of discussion forums on the right, recordings and different things like that on the right, and then live sessions on the left. So I want to minimize that for now. So first you have to think about synchronous versus asynchronous. And while I said a minute ago, objectives drive this process, the other thing that drives this process are two other factors, and one being the requirements of your course. So depending on the requirements of your course may require some kind of synchronous FaceTime, whether that's the dynamic of the way the course was set up in the registration system, or whether it has to do with specific components of the international standards around your course. And so that's one, and then of course your objectives, and then two is the need to interact with students. So those require synchronous communication. If you're in a situation where you're teaching an online course that does not specifically require online synchronous communication, you have options. And so you want to really think about those options, because if you take and enroll students in a fully online course, bring them in and start requiring a bunch of synchronous communication in different areas, shapes, and forms, then that messes with schedules and causes more complications for students. So with this slide, there's a lot of things to think about when you're deciding which form of communication you're going to use and what drives that decision. As I move on to the next slide, possibly. There we go. So the synchronous tools that are available, there's a list of them, and they include Collaborate, Teams, and Zoom. And Distance Learning, again, has put together a document that gives you some information on when you should use each one. And so there's details at the top of the document, and these are all available through the repository, the faculty repository inside of Moodle, but I've created direct links to them in case you want to navigate straight there. So there's information at the top on Collaborate, and then Teams and Zoom, and then you have a table that kind of gives a comparison of what each option offers. If you scroll down through, when you get near the bottom, it talks about number of maximum participants in the session, then how many can be seen on the screen at a particular time, how long the meetings can last, and so forth. So there's a comparison if you're trying to decide, you know, which tool you're going to use of those that are available in your class and for what purpose. So we've provided that. And as we go to the next slide, other technology tools. So you're going to sometimes need things other than just strictly video conferencing, videos, and that type stuff. So as previously mentioned, the tool selection process should be driven by the actions being taught and assessed and objectives, not based on the latest and greatest or the cool factor. The integration of third-party tools should not create additional challenges, barriers, or roadblocks for students. Now, you can create activities or lessons where you say that, you know, maybe you're having the final product that's due is a presentation of some sort. And you can leave it up to students to choose what delivery method they decide to use. And they can then go and seek out a tool if they want to kind of be creative in their design of that final presentation. But you're not necessarily prescribing them a list of tools to use. So I put a statement at the bottom of this slide, and I'm going to have Melissa jump in here for a minute. But Mitchell Community College is working on a tool vetting process for when you're adding additional third-party tools into your course. So Melissa, did you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I will. I'll jump in for just a second. And pretty much what that process would look like is just a best practice. We'll refer to it right now. And the main purpose of the vetting process is for accessibility purposes. And so when you find a tool or software that you want to use in your course, the first thing that you would want to do is to check with your program coordinator for approval. And then the next thing would be for you to request a VPAT from that vendor or publisher. And that VPAT is an accessibility compliance report. And what that does is, if you're not familiar with VPAT, or accessibility compliance report, that takes every component of that tool or that software and breaks down every component and tells how that software or tool can be used with accessibility tools. So what we would like for you to do is, once we have that VPAT, send that VPAT over. We do have a form to fill out to submit that VPAT to Distance Learning, and let us take a look at that VPAT. And because there's a lot of good tools out there, a lot of good software, and some of the, like Chris just said, there's a lot of cool things out there, but a lot of them are just cool. They may not be accessible, and we want to take a look at that universal design for learning. We want it accessible for everyone. And so once that VPAT is to us, let us take a look at it and see if that tool, where it is at as far as being accessible. And as we are vetting that tool, go ahead and get that quote from that vendor. And then once it might take us a week or so or two to get to that, because the VPAT it could be, sometimes they can be 2 or 3 pages long. Sometimes they can be, I have seen them 12 pages long or even more sometimes. So once that VPAT, we get back to you and let you know what the recommendations are. It could be that we say, hey, this VPAT is good to go, this tool is good to go. Or it could be that we come back and say, could you contact the vendor and see if there's a workaround for this, because maybe everything's not accessible by the keyboard or by a mouse or something like that. So we may make recommendations to you. But once that is good to go, then you could either may find another tool or go ahead and purchase that tool. So that's what we're working on right now to get that process approved.
Thanks, Melissa. And I want to follow up that the reason for the vetting process is not a control issue, in case some of you might have been thinking that. Um, the way that accessibility works is that if you as a faculty member choose to use a particular technology in your course, then you are in essence basically then liable, accountable for that tool being accessible. And so if something like accessibility came into question, then you would be held liable in that situation. So we are trying to take some of that responsibility off of you by being the distance learning group or team working together to go through that VPAT for you so that you don't have to do that. So we're actually kind of trying to take some responsibility off your plate by doing this process. So with that being said, we're not going to spend time going over a bunch of tools and different things like that. That's not what this session, is about, but we want to make sure that all faculty know what's available and what's out there for you. So the next thing we're going to move into is data and privacy protection. So I've put on here that any tool that requires students to create an account and or sign in should have a privacy policy available. Links to the privacy policies for each tool should be provided for students to access. So when we're talking about this, we've got things like I teach CIS 110. We use the Cengage software, which includes SAM and MindTap. That requires students to create an account, sign in, log in. It collects all of their assignments are completed through there, so they have grades and everything. And so there has to be a guarantee that that data is protected on different levels. And so you don't have to know a whole lot about what is included in those privacy policies. You should be, if you're going out and accessing new things that are storing student information, be aware of the privacy policy and kind of be able to glance through it and look for anything that stands out. But some of them, kind of like the VPATs that Melissa was just talking about, some of the privacy policies can be very legal talk and very lengthy and long. So there's sometimes things that are going to stand out. But anything that, so like technically Moodle, and I want to talk about that in a minute. Students log into Moodle. It is offered through Mitchell Community College, but Moodle does have to have a privacy policy. And so what we're going to talk about next real quick are there two overlying high-level privacy things that we need to worry about, and most of us are all fully aware of those. I only added the second one because a lot of you are probably going to look at it and say, well, under 13, that doesn't pertain to us. I put this on here because one of the thoughts behind this are that we do have, and Paul, this goes towards you, the early childhood program. And so we have students that are working with students of different ages. And so we, as they're doing that, as they're creating lesson plans, doing activities, whatever they do in those early childhood courses, they need to make sure that they're aware of the whole Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, or COPA, and what that means in terms of protecting the data of any individual that's under the age of 13. Most web-based tools that you go out and create accounts for say you have to be at least 13 years of age or older to create an account or have parental permission, and there's a process for that. But the one that pertains to us more than anything is FERPA. We've all been through different levels of FERPA training at different times. I put in there the important pieces that the FERPA privacy policy transfers over from from parent before age 18 to student after age 18. And I specifically put that in there because we do have a number of high school students who are working inside of our courses, and so we have to be aware of what's inside of FERPA on both sides. What we're going to do for the bulk of the remainder of the session is we're going to talk about supporting all the student needs that we talked about in topic 3 for today. And those include support materials such as technical accessibility next is already included in the Moodle course template that you get when you get your course at the beginning of each semester. We're just going to highlight those things, and we're going to start talking about the big picture or the big goal for what this training was intended to do this spring. And so with that, we talked a little bit about it in the very beginning and haven't come back to it in a while. And a lot of this that we've done this spring has all revolved around the process for quality matters. And so ultimately what we were hoping would happen is that rather than Mitchell coming out and saying, we're going to, send your courses for review, or we're going to create some kind of internal process where we have faculty review each other's courses and all that type stuff, we are hoping that independently on your own that you'll take time to use the tools that are available to you based on all the training that we've done this spring, which is all focused around the different pieces of Quality Matters, to review your own course. And so we're going to spend time doing that for the rest of today's session. We're not going to review a course, but I want to show you the Quality Matters system itself. I want to show you how to get in and create a self-review and other important pieces that you'll need to complete the assignment that goes along with today's session. So I'm going to switch gears for just a minute. So hold on. At this point in time, does anyone have any questions, thoughts, concerns, or anything that they want to share real quick before I switch over gears? Okay, so I'm going to close out the presentation and minimize that. And I'm going to bring up the online course design course in Moodle. So I'm going to bring that up and talk about that first. So I've created the page and information for session 6, which is what we're on today. It does have our topics at the top. The only reading that I put inside of here for this week is from the actual Higher Education Quality Matters rubric workbook, and we're going to be talking specifically about General Standards 6, 7, and a little bit about 8. So you'll need, I've created or added 2 files or handouts for you inside of this document, or inside of this page. And the first one, gives you directions for creating and setting up Quality Matters accounts. And I've already set mine up, so you won't see that, but we did create a handout that walks you through that process. And then statements of evidence for Quality Matters self-review. So we're going to talk about that part next. So I'm going to go to Quality Matters myself. And what you do once you go, it's qualitymatters.org, and then you go to membership and my QM login, and you'll sign in. So if you haven't signed in or ever created an account, you'll follow the directions on that first handout that I've linked inside today's session. And it may take me just a minute to log in. All right. So your account will look a little bit different than mine. I'm actually dual certified. I'm certified in K-12 and a bunch of other areas. So I have access to multiple things, but you should only see higher education at the top. Like if I scroll to the right, sorry, I must have been to the left, I believe. Yeah, higher education comes first. You should only see that at the top. But what you'll do is you'll click on CRMS, which is the Course Review Management System inside of Quality Matters. And it takes just a minute. The system's slow today. Now, I have to change mine manually at the top, but again, you should only have access to higher education. So if you're doing this for the first time, you would click Start a Self-Review. I'll go into that for just a second. And so what you would do is you would select a rubric, which for higher ed, it's the 6th edition, and then you would give your review a title. I'm going to go back because I already have started a self-review. So if you started one to go back and work on it, you would go to work on your course worksheet. Well, you should see it. I'm not sure why it's not coming up. So for the purpose of today, I'll go in and start another review. Let me check one more place real quick. Oh, sorry, self-reviews. That's what I'm forgetting. So if I go over to self-reviews, I've started one, and it is titled, the one that we want to look at today is titled C. Smith CS 110 Spring 2021. So to access it, you'll click on the little paper and pencil to the left, and you'll go inside of there. And so once it loads, you will have access to your self-review. And inside your self-review, the way that this works, if you have not seen the rubric workbook before, basically the self-review is the rubric workbook broken out into different segments that you can click on. There are two different pieces to each, or three different pieces to each item. So across the top, you have 8 tabs, and those are called general standards. So general standard 1 is about the course overview and introduction. I'm not going to go through all of them. The ones that we are focusing on today are general standard 6, which is course technology, and general standard 7, which is learner support. Okay. So with that being said, what happens is if you click on the general standard, then you have what are called specific review standards, or SRS. And so you have specific review standards 6.1, 0.2, 0.3, and 0.4. And each of those specific review standards is a different piece that your course is supposed to have. And so if you look at all the items for General Standard 6 for course technology, 6.1 is that the tools used in the course support the learning objectives or competencies, and so that's our alignment piece we talked about a little bit ago. 6.2 is that course tools promote learner engagement and active learning. We talked a little bit about that. A variety of technology is used in the course. That does not mean, when you see that, we'll talk more about what the annotations are in a minute, that does not mean you need to go out and seek out all kinds of external tools. Internal tools count towards that as well. And then 6.4 has to do with protecting the data and privacy of students. So when you go to complete a self-review, and we're actually going to have, by the time you're done today, you're going to have there's a total of 42, which is a lot. And so there's no deadline. This is all up to you. No one's saying you have to go through the entire process. It's meant strictly for you and your own personal improvement of your courses and evaluations. No one's going to be looking at this. No one can see it. I can't log into the system and see your self-reviews. You can't see my self-reviews. Again, it's just meant for me and my personal professional work that I do. But there are a total of 44, or 42, and I'm going to give you the information today to have 6 of those 42 completed without you really having to do much of anything other than copy and paste. And so we're going to jump over to General Standard 6, and we're going to start with General Standard 6 and Specific Review Standard 6.4. And so if you look at the annotations, they talk about what you should have in order to meet that requirement. And so if I look inside there, it talks about course design tools, enhance student privacy, or they can enhance student privacy. If I go down the list, what I'm really looking for is examples of privacy provision reviewers may look for in the course. So if I were reviewing this course, I would look to see that privacy policies for publisher resources and integrations are there. So I mentioned earlier CS 110, Cengage, so I'll show you that piece in a minute. Privacy policies of social media and third-party websites being used. We're going to look at those. I do not use social media, so I won't have those inside of the course. External tools integrated into the LMS, plagiarism detection tools, messaging tools, and so forth. Statements noting that a privacy policy does not exist for the tool. So if you are using a tool one doesn't, you want to note about that if you're having students enter in their own personal identifiable information. Not going to go down the whole list. So what I have done, and I'll bring it up, is that inside, I'll bring the document up first. Actually, let me start with the course itself. So course, in the top left, when you get your template, you have the page that's titled Course Syllabus and Getting Started. And so if you go to that page, you'll have your syllabus and schedule, but down at the bottom, you should see what's called a book built inside of Moodle. And there are 9 different chapters to that book. Now, if I go into my CIS 110 course, and I'll do that real quick. So if I go into my courses, we figured out this morning that the wrong book ended up getting imported when we set up my course. But if I go into my page, Course Syllabus and Getting Started, you'll see that mine's a little bit different, but it's still there. It's got all these different pages that are a part of it. So rather than show you the wrong version, I want to show you the right version in the template. I'm not going to make any edits or additions to it, but I want to show you these pieces. And so you'll notice that there is a chapter titled Privacy Policy. And so if I go in and click on Privacy Policy, you'll see that there are a number of privacy statements that have already been linked, which include OpenLMS, which is Moodle. Mitchell Community College itself has their own privacy policy, and so that has been linked. Upswing, if you're not familiar with what Upswing is used for, that is our peer tutoring software that's used. And then the Aviso retention system software. So those are linked as well. Now, if you're like me, and I didn't realize till we were preparing for this yesterday, and I intentionally left it like this to show, the next item says delete, and it says if a learner is required to create a username and password to access a tool, the privacy policy is posted for that tool. So what is really supposed to happen at the beginning of each semester, when you get your course inside, when you get your course template for your sections, is that you would go in and erase this part. You would add a statement for each of the other additional tools that you have. So it's underneath here that you would have that written out, and you would fill in the parts that are in parentheses. Now we're going to change a couple things in the wording on this page in the newer versions of the template, because it's actually the name of the item that should be linked and not the word privacy policy for accessibility pieces. So we talked about that yesterday. So a bulk of that is done. If you don't use anything outside of Moodle and the tools that are available in it, and you built everything in the course focused on that, then you would just delete these 2 items and everything is good. Oh, I hear a chat. So let me jump over that real quick. Hold on. Go ahead. Go ahead, Paul. Sorry.
Paul, do you have a question?
I'm sorry, I didn't turn my mic on. I'm wondering, because since we moved everything online this last year, you know, should we have a statement in there about the use of YouTube videos and things like that?
Not for this part. So this is strictly for with the privacy policy. I kind of get where that could get with privacy, but This is really just making sure that student data is protected. Usernames, passwords, so for instance, like Cengage, they actually have to purchase an access code, so they would be putting in credit card information possibly to do that. And so it needs to make sure, like, the purpose behind this particular piece is protecting that data. But in terms of something similar to like what you're talking about, that would be slightly different. So I think we're good in terms of everything we're talking about for this. We wouldn't need anything specifically for YouTube, you know, because they're not creating their own accounts, anything like that. Now, one of the things Melissa and I talked about yesterday is that a student can register for their own Screencast-O-Matic account, free account, that allows them to record up to 15 minutes of video if they would like to. If that is something that's integrated into the course, what I'll go ahead and do is I'll look up the privacy information for that and go ahead and include it in this master list, just in case that would happen, so that you don't have to go through each time you decide to do that and add it. But that's the only other, if you're doing that, or you're using, like I said, Cengage for CIS 110, I would need to add a statement for those two if I'm doing that and add it to this. So what I do want to show, if I go back to this evidence piece and this self-review, what I've spent some time doing before this process, for today's session, and to help you with this self-review, is that I've created a document, if I can get my mouse to go to the right place, that I will put up on the screen now. And I'm going to kind of do a split screen for a minute. So the document on the left is what I titled Statements for Quality Matters Self-Review. And on the right, I'll put in let me get these side by side. Okay, so for 6.4, I just told you or showed you that there's a book that's already built into the template. And so as a result of that, you already have that privacy piece, for the most part, set up in your course. The only thing, and I added it in bold, italics, and highlighted, is that I had to add an additional piece to show that I use one other piece of software that's a third-party tool that does have a privacy policy, and I linked it with the Cengage software hyperlink to show that. And I put a little note that says, you know, when you're doing your own self-review, if you're looking at your course and you have other tools like this, you would do something similar where you would add some additional information. You would actually do it in the course, in your own course, that tool is used, and then you wouldn't put the additional statement here. I just did it to show, but you would just basically, this is all set up so you can copy word for word what I wrote, minus the CIS 110 part. You can go over into the evidence section and simply just paste that as evidence if you're doing a self-review. Okay, so that's all in there, and I'll take the bold off. You don't have a whole lot of tools inside of here, but I'll take the bold and italics off so that it's all set up. So you don't need to, unless you wanted to. Like if you were reviewing one of the items and you thought of some ideas where you wanted to change things around or address something, you could go down into the section where it says suggestions for improvement, and you can add those if you want. But in terms of doing a self-review, you don't have to. Now, with mine, I wrote mine more in paragraph form. This is your own self-review. I wrote mine. I do a lot of reviews of other courses for Quality Matters. And so I did mine as if to show you an example of if you would submit your course for a Quality Matters review, what I wrote in the evidence section is what a reviewer would write. Maybe when they looked for the evidence and found it, they would put what they found to validate that you have, in fact, met that standard. So one of the things you'll notice is that now, because I put evidence in this box and I checked off that it was met, there should be a check mark beside 6.4. But the way the system works is that it wants you to put the evidence in first and then check met or not met. But I intentionally didn't do that because I wanted to show you in case you got in and couldn't figure out what was going on. Now that I've put evidence in, if I click inside of it and I change it from met to not met and back, then all of a sudden my check mark is there and I'm ready to go. Now, if I put my evidence in first and then hit met, I wouldn't have had to do that. So now we're going to do something similar. So if I scroll down this list, I'm not going to go into all of the resources that are in there, but if I go back to the template, you'll see in the chapters that there's an accessibility page, and on that accessibility page, it gives the VPAT information, the accessibility documentation for Office 365, for Moodle, for WebAdvisor, for Upswing. It talks about Adobe accessibility, Microsoft accessibility. All kinds of accessibility statements are already built into your course to where you don't have to worry about that part specifically unless you use something additional, again, like we did with 6.4. So we'll get into which one that goes for in a minute. But we've got student resources. Inside the student resources, they have a direct link to Upswing to get the tutoring. They have to the Mind Center, which is the student academic support center, the library, and then the Right Place for some writing assistance. You also have inside of here college resources. And inside of college resources, they can access the academic calendar. They can access the student handbook, academic advising, student life information. There's a variety of things that student rights and responsibilities, student code of conduct. So you have some important pieces that are built into this book that really help you with the Quality Matters review. So if I look at specific review standard 7.1, it is all focused on technology support in terms of supporting students with who to contact if they have issues. This is not like, hey, my laptop's not working, like, what do I do? This is like, I can't log into the LMS, that type thing. There's some information on how to contact distance learning, but there's also information that's included on the page. And I think it's student resources, I believe, is where additional contacts and supports, sorry. So when you get to the contacts and supports, one of those is actually supposed to be your instructor information. If you didn't know that was there, you should be filling that out at the beginning of each semester. But then under that is where you see the information for internal Moodle support from Crystal and Melissa, and the DL information at mitchellcc.edu email account. But then there's also 24/7 user support services available for OpenLMS, Moodle. A student could use that. There's a website, there's a phone number, there's all that information they need. And so that information, along with the short narrative, is enough to consider standard 7.1 met. So again, you would just copy the information I've provided on the document. You would then go over to 7.1. You would go into the evidence, and then you would just paste that in there. You wouldn't have to change anything at all, met, and you've checked that one off the list. We're going to keep going. So 7.2 is all about, there's two different pieces that are about accessibility. And so 7.2 is about, if I look at the standard, course instructions articulate or link to the institution's accessibility policies and services. So this is more like, if I am a student that needs accessibility services, who do I go to and what do I do? And so if I go back to that book that I was showing, there is an accessibility page, and it only links right now to those other tools. But at the top, we are going to be adding a link that goes directly to, and I'll go to the website and show everyone where it is, links directly to Mitchell's accessibility page. So if I go to accessibility, go to accessibility policy, there are 4 pages that make up our that make it. So if I go to the menu on the right, so under student services, we have accessibility services. So if I go to that main page, it gives our vision mission statement, and there's an application there that students can complete and fill out, and if they need accommodations for accessibility. So if you weren't aware that that was there, that is there. We're going to put this information into that book for you so that you don't have to change, go find, do, add, link, or anything else, but wanted to make sure that everyone knew that that support was there. There's information, there's a page on accommodations and what those accommodations may consist of in terms of documentation, different things. Again, the application's on that page. Accessibility aids, this has to do with sign language interpreters, assistive technology, captioning. There's some information on that, and then student rights and responsibilities when it comes to accessibility. So all we have to do, and I've put a statement in here already, a link to the Mitchell CC Accessibility Services webpage is found on the Chapter 5 accessibility page in the book. So we will be adding that. So once that has been added, or you can go ahead and do it while you're doing your self-review, then I would just go ahead and copy that, go to the evidence section for 7.2, and I would paste that in there, and I would go ahead and check that off as met. So already 2 of the 4 from Standard 7, General Standard 7, have been met. I clicked on it earlier and showed you the student support services. That's to the library, to tutoring, and everything else. So again, for 7.3, I would just copy the information that's provided on the document. I'll go over to 7.3. I would add that as evidence. I would paste that in there, and then I would add that as met. And then finally, 7.4. This is the same resource I showed a minute ago too, that has access to, this is college resources, and that's the academic schedule, student services support page, student life information, all that's on that page. So I can just highlight that information, copy, and I can go into 7.4, and I can, remember, hit evidence first and paste, and then I can click met. And so already, out of that, out of the 8 standards, just by what's already in the course when it comes to you, you've already met everything under General Standard 7, which is the learner support. There's one other item I've added to the bottom of the document, and that is going over into General Standard 8, which is all focused on accessibility and usability. And so if I go to the bottom to 8.6, it says vendor accessibility statements, which are VPATs, are provided for all technologies required in the course. And so again, just like we did a little bit ago with 6.4, I would copy this information and add it, but I also added again my statement at the bottom because I do use Cengage. They do have an accessibility page, and so I added the information or the link to that. So I'll go in and I'll paste that information. Again, I'll change the formatting on this so that it's all the same formatting. And again, that is met. So we've given you and put together that information for you already to help you start your self-review. As you're working in the system, I want to tell you kind of a little bit about how this review system for Quality Matters works. If I sit here and type a little bit and kind of go away from it, you'll most likely, or maybe you've already seen it while I've been working and I haven't been watching, a message will pop up and say that it's automatically saved or updated. Sometimes it gets caught in the middle of that and you'll think that it's frozen or locked up. It's not actually, it's just taking a minute to process in the back and trying to save it. But I can also go to the bottom and manually save my self-review. And so if I save my self-review and I go out, it's going to show me all the different things that I haven't addressed yet, but it's also going to give me an option to go in and edit self-review. And so with that, I can go back, and now it's going to show that I've completed 6 of the 42. If I go to 6, I can see that I've completed 6.4. Notice General Standard 7 is already checked off. That means when I click on it, all 4 of those have already been met. 6 and 8 do not have checks because I've only done a small piece of that. Now, if I go through some of these, I'm just going to do this briefly. Some of these are going to be quick for you to do in your own courses. And so what we will do because today's session was only focused on 6 and 7, I only added that information in terms of the document on the left. But what I will be going through and doing over the next couple weeks before our next session is to go through each of these standards and find the other ones that will be sort of universal from one course to the next, and add some additional information to give you some guidance on the evidence. Now, I'm not going to go through all 42, but there is some information that will be in the syllabus, like learners are introduced to the purpose and structure of the course. That's information that gets added to your syllabus. So that would just be copied over and pasted and show you it's here, it's in the syllabus, that's it, good, move on. So at this point in time, does anyone have any questions about any of this? This is strictly optional again, but it is what our whole training this spring was focused on. You can see course introduction overview. We started with that. We went into learning objectives, creating those, our SLOs, our module level, our course level, and making sure those are measurable. When we get into 3, it talks about assessments and measurements, that all of our assessments are varied, that they meet they align to the objectives. Also, we get into General Standard 4, and that is all about the instructional materials and how they line and the variety of those. Learning activities are part of General Standard 5. We talked a little bit about General Standard 6, and that's the one that I wanted to show you to finish. So we didn't address 6.1, 2, or 3. And part of that is the tools used in the course support the learning objectives or competencies. So the assignment, and we talked about as we did this session, have done these sessions, each week there's some kind of assignment to go along with it to get some additional credit. And we talked about that in the beginning. And so if I go into session 6 and I go down to the page for session 6, I've created an assignment. And up to this point, for the last few weeks, it's been a discussion forum. And so there's not really a purpose for using a discussion forum in this instance, because this is not what, in the past, we wanted to, like if you found an OER resource that looked really good to you, we wanted that shared so everyone could see and kind of feed off that conversation. But in this self-review, this is you kind of judging yourself. And so I've created this as an assignment instead, to where you submit it. Of course, we'll see information. And then once we do that, you're good. So all the assignment is that you will go into, between now and whenever we set the deadline for everything to be finished, you will go into General Standard 6 and you'll take one of the 3, either 6.1, 2, or 3, read the annotations information and what should be found, and kind of go through your course and see what kinds of evidence you can find to put in here. And then you would just put that information in the evidence section, and then you would either choose met or not met. Now, there's a whole piece to Quality Matters that says it must be at 85% and everything. We're not going to get into those kind of details with this process. What we're just looking for is that we're starting to get those supports and processes and everything in place. Like with what we did today, everyone would be good for those items because the setup of the template. So I'm going to stop with that and see if there are any questions. That is the bulk, that is what we had to talk about today and share in terms of technology and student support. So I'm going to jump back over into the session and see. I don't see anything in the chat. Does anyone have any questions, concerns, thoughts, ideas? Anyone think they might do a self-review? Go ahead, Paul.
Thank he might be muted.
One of the things I get at the beginning of the semester a lot, especially if they're incoming freshmen, is that I can't log into the LMS. So even though you have all these links for them to click on, is there any way for them to access these links outside of the LMS if they can't log on?
Melissa, do you know if some of the stuff is on the Mitchell website itself?
Paul, exactly what are you talking about? Like how to log in?
Well, no. What happens is I'll get an email from a student saying that they can't log in, or they're having difficulty with their username and password and all that sort of thing. So if they needed technical support, um, you have all this in the book, but if they can't log into the course, how are they going to get access to? How are they going to get access to all these resources?
Yes, we have a DL FAQ page.
Okay.
In the distance learning, you go to the DL FAQ or distance learning FAQ page.
Okay, I didn't know you had one.
Yes. And we also, at the beginning of every semester, send out how to log in to students with exactly how to log in and who to email for help and everything. So they should have that. Every student should have that as well.
Okay.
We send that to all students. So we, and also that is in the faculty staff repository in the how to help students section. So that is in there as well.
I was just wondering.
Okay. Trying to stump me again, aren't you?
Of course.
Yeah, so I brought up the page that Melissa was talking about. I've got on the right side of the screen. If you scroll down through, there's some additional information in terms of what technical skills do I need for online, what type of computer. There's some additional information on top of that. And then again, like Crystal was saying, if I go to My Mitchell at the top of the page, the top of the website, then they have password services that they can go through as well. And then they can walk through, reset my password and stuff like that if they haven't, or if they're not able to get in. So there's a couple different things that are available to them. Now, we can centralize that information in terms of like what I've added to this document. I can kind of add some wording to that to kind of say like here this is and here that is, so that everyone knows where to go and find it. To locate it, but those are available.
Also, Chris, if you will go on the My Mitchell page, back on, if you'll just click back and then go to the LMS. So, well, you would have to log out, but don't log out. But on the login.
I can log out.
Okay. On the login screen, down there at Help with Login, there's some information there for students. So we do have some resources for students.
And that was a good question too. The other thing I wanted to mention is that as you start working on the self-reviews, if that is something you want to do, and you have questions about it, like if you're looking at the annotation and trying to come up with your information and evidence, and you're just not sure, or it seems kind of confusing, because some of them can be at times, and you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. I do this a number of different times, so I'm actually wrapping up, or in the middle of my 13th review overall. I'm a certified master reviewer for K-12, so I've been Quality Matters has been hit hard in the K-12 level since back before December because of all the remote learning. So I've been doing 2 at a time for them since December in terms of review. So I'm used to going into courses and digging through and looking for evidence. Again, it's not a punitive thing at all. It's just to kind of help you recognize, just like we had today, a conversation about, I never paid attention to the help with login option being there for students. I learned something new today. The intent behind Quality Matters has always been continuous growth. And so it's for you to basically just look at your stuff, analyze it, and start looking at ways that you can improve. And I know that there's definitely ways that I can improve, and I continuously work on those. So I am here to support any one of you as you start working on that, to help kind of guide you through the evidence piece. If you have any questions or comments about that along the way, please feel free to reach out to me. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? If not, I appreciate everyone taking their time to be here today. The last thing that I was going to say is that session 7, which is the next one in a couple weeks, is the last session we're going to do. If there is anything that you can think of that we haven't talked about so far, or that you would like to see demonstrated or discussed or presented, please reach out to me, Crystal, or Melissa, and let us know, because that's what the last session's meant to do, is to kind of go into, you know, what are the additional supports that you need from us in order to help you with this process. We talked in the fall about everything that's available inside the LMS. This time we've talked about the instructional design philosophy and process itself, as it revolves around Quality Matters, Universal Design for Learning, and backwards design. And so now we're at the point of, here's all this information, what have we missed and how can we help you? So if you can think about that and share that with us, like Melissa said, a survey type questionnaire will be coming, but we would love for information to come from you all to help drive this. And we will be reaching out too, because the other part of what we want to do in that last session is we want to give some of you who are willing, and we hope that some of you will be willing, an opportunity to share some of the things that you've either learned or changed or done as a result of both the sessions in the fall and the sessions this spring. And so we've had a really good turnout each session that we've done. And we really want to give you all an opportunity to highlight and showcase what you've done. I've learned through multiple experiences that faculty learn best from other faculty sharing what they've done. I don't want it to sound like I'm the person up in the tower looking down. I want it to be like we're sharing amongst colleagues. Like I said, I have lessons to learn. I've shared that I've found where I didn't add my contact information. I've shared mistakes I've made along the way. But we just hope that you've learned some good stuff and are willing to share some of that in our last session. So again, appreciate you all joining us, and I'll go ahead and stop the recording, and thank you all for coming this afternoon.